Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. How would you like to turn your life around by unlocking your creativity? Today I have on the show someone who went from being overlooked to being overbooked. Maybe you're listening to us right now and you're getting overlooked for job opportunities, for business opportunities, for contract business deals, or maybe you're getting overlooked for opportunity to settle down with someone who you would love to get married to or get involved with. This conversation is going to be a game changer for you because today I have on the show Peter Moore, who is going to take us through a journey of how he went from being overlooked to being overbooked. Hi, Peter Moore. Do you want to introduce yourself to us as we get this started?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be here, and it is also great to go from overlooked to overbooked. So I was for a long time, I was a magazine editor and book author until the publishing industry went under, essentially in the U.S., or completely changed the terms under which it was operating. This was also at the time of COVID, so I had about 8 months there where all of my regular gigs had dried up, and I had to ask myself, where was I going to go with the publishing world right now? And the way I decided to go with it was that I got to work on a memoir that I'd been meaning to write for a long time. But the switch that happened in my life at that time was I was writing about all these personal experiences I'd been through right after I graduated from college when I was traveling around in Europe and trying to figure out who I was. And at a certain point, I decided that the book would be improved if I started adding my illustrations to it. So I started not only writing about these funny experiences I was having as a 23-year-old nincompoop, but I was also drawing the experiences too, and it led to a creative breakthrough in my life, which also allowed me to convince many of the editors who I was working for earlier on in my career that they needed to hire me as a double threat, as a cartoonist and as a writer. And my work now is so much more fun than it used to be. I can't say it's as lucrative as it used to be, but hey, all things in good time. But I did have that creative breakthrough that you're talking about.
Wow, excellent. So I think another way to tag this conversation could be how to turn your life around by writing books creatively, right? And then going from overlooked to overbooked with books. Yeah, that's pretty much a spin on that. And that brings me to my next question because the theme of this podcast is to actually help people go from idea to increased income, go from concept to cash flow, making more money, pretty much. So, do you want to tell us what your understanding of the concept of creativity is as we begin this conversation?
You know, I've always felt that creativity was a person's ability to connect. Unlikely ideas, unlikely thoughts. I mean, that's what humor is. You take a basic situation and put a twist on it. So one of my main gigs right now is that I'm a cartoonist and columnist for the Colorado Sun. I live in Colorado in the States. And the way I pitched myself to the editor of the Colorado Sun was, Coloradans are all proud about their state and how beautiful it is and all the amazing things that we can do here. But really, isn't that just another brand of ignorance, in that these people need to be taken down a peg and not be so self-satisfied with how glorious their state is and how wonderful it is to live there? So I pitched him on the idea of making fun of the things that Coloradans love most, and he thought that was a great idea. I'm 3 years into that gig, and I'm still coming up with a million ideas that would be great to illustrate for the Colorado Sun. And, not long after I started working for them, yeah, I publish on Sundays there, and the editor got back to me and said that I had had the most traffic they had ever had on a Sunday, just because people thought my idea was so funny. So you take an idea, state of Colorado, you add on top of it, it's really kind of ridiculous, the things that people do here in Colorado. Put them together in a format, cartooning, that makes people laugh anyway and draws them to the publication I'm working for. And that combo has been great for me and launched my career in a whole new direction.
Great. So, what would you say is the biggest drawback or roadblock that keeps people stuck and not able to tap into their creativity and turn their ideas into increased income?
People are just way too hard on themselves. That
Hmm.
people don't feel like they have permission to create something new. They don't feel like they have permission to go into a creative field at all. They make a scroll on a piece of paper and say, "Oh, well, that stinks. I'm a terrible artist. I can't do that."
Hmm.
And you know what? I was criticizing myself that way when I began, but pretty soon I
Hmm.
realized, when you look at, some of the artists I admire, John Singer Sargent, Picasso, certainly James Thurber, the great cartoonist for the New Yorker. It's not like their images were perfect. They weren't photographic reality. What they were was reality filtered through their own personal way of looking at the world. And
Yeah.
that is what creativity is nurturing your own vision of how you see the world, what you love about it, what you hate about it, what you find funny about it. If you can trust yourself and your instincts that way, then that's the first step on the road. It's not like you need some editor to tell you that your writing is funny or that your drawings are good. What you need to do is convince yourself first. And if you have your own personal passion, your own belief, and I'm not saying that this happens quickly. For me, I developed it over the course of 10 years when I was taking a bunch of art courses, not knowing where that was going, just knowing that I had a passion for it. Uh, the further I got into it, the more passionate I became about it. And that was the key that told me, you're onto something here, keep going. So trust in yourself, trust your instincts, trust your passions for what you love to do and what you find interesting, and follow that route. Pretty soon along the way, people can catch up with you. When I began on Substack, I'm at petermoore.substack.com. I had 200 subscribers. Nobody cared what I was doing. Nobody reacted to it. Now,
Hmm.
3 years later, I've got 14,000 subscribers, and it's a very popular
Wow.
Substack. So, what came first was my self belief and my enjoyment of doing the work, and people came along for the ride once they saw how much fun I was having.
That's pretty inspirational because many people actually give up and throw in the towel when they begin to work on their creative side or their creative passion, and they make an excuse and they say, oh, nobody cares, it's not working. So what would you say someone can do who has given up right now to help them, pick up their lost creativity? Because I call these sets of people lost creatives. These are people who have, they've even forgotten that they once had any passion, any gift, because when they tried, they encountered some form of obstacle or disruption, and so because of that, they have buried their gifts and it's now dead and gone. So, what would you say to these kinds of people on how they can actually turn their lives around by picking up that creative passion and igniting it again? What I call ignite your creativity.
Yeah, well, fire starting is difficult, especially if the wood is wet and you're sitting in the middle of a forest and it's raining on you. So, I understand that instinct to give it up, and I'll be honest with you, not all ideas are great. When I started out
Hmm.
on my creative career, I really didn't know which direction it was going to go in. All I knew was that I had an ability to draw and that I was a pretty funny guy. So it took years for
Mm.
those two, for humor and artwork, to connect with one another. And I know exactly when it happened. I was taking an acrylics art course here in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I live, and I had done a perfectly nice it was a landscape that I'd seen in California when I was traveling there, and it had a big road coming down the middle of it and some mountains behind. It was a perfectly fine landscape, and it was also perfectly boring, which to me said, this is a failure. What am I going to do to make this image better? And what I came up with when I was just looking at that road, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I had rabbits hopping in one direction on the road and foxes coming in the other, as if they were commuting to work, rabbits going one way, foxes the other. And I found out that I had so much fun painting the various things that the rabbits were doing as they hopped down the road, and the ways that the foxes were running, but also noticing that there were rabbits on the road and that they might like to eat them. All of a sudden, it went from being a really boring landscape to being this complex interaction, and also a funny one, between rabbits and the foxes who wanted to eat them. And I completed this acrylic painting. It's now hanging in the front room in our house as my reminder every time I come into my creative field, is like, you need to go from boring to hilarious. What steps can you take to turn the idea of an image on its head and make it something funny? And literally from that moment onward, I didn't look at my artwork the same way I had been. What I was looking for were funny narratives that could come out of my artwork. And that was an aha moment for me. It's what turned on my creativity. And you know what? It takes time to do that. You need to develop your skills, but you also need to, maybe get far enough along in your artwork that you think, okay, this is fine but boring. How am I going to make it specific to me? And that's what the change was for me when I drew those foxes and rabbits. And each of your listeners has to find that creative key that unlocks what their work is supposed to be about. You can't be generic, can't be the same stuff everyone else is doing, especially in the age of AI. You can't produce something that looks like a computer spat it out. You need to do something that's very specific to you and taps into your passion. And that's what will unleash your creativity.
Awesome. Now let's talk about going from passion to profit, because I've seen a lot of creatives who are stuck in the middle, right? They have this thing they are so passionate about, but they don't know how to turn it into profit, right? They may be passionate about it, they may be proficient at it, but they are not yet profitable at it. And this is also another thing that keeps many creatives stuck and forces them or causes them to throw in the towel. So, do you have any workflow, any thought process, any framework that has helped you turn your passion to profit in this journey that you've been on, that you can recommend to others?
Yeah, it's one of the things that you need to know about any artistic endeavor is that you're not the first one to try it. So what I did when I started my cartooning was to look around and find the people who were doing it well and who were doing it in prominent places, and trying to figure out, well, what is it that they're doing that I'm not? So it's always instructive in any creative endeavor to spend a lot of time seeing what others are doing in the same endeavor, and how they're making a go of it. And it's the way that I discovered Substack, was that I was with a friend of mine having lunch. He was a creative guy too. And I was talking to him about exactly the same things you are, which is I've developing a lot of material. I love what I'm doing now, but I don't have an audience for it. How am I going to find that audience? And my buddy said, you've got so much stuff available. You really ought to be on. You ought to be posting on Substack. And what's great about Substack is that you're in control of everything that you do there. Everybody who subscribes to your channel, you own their email addresses, which is very good for marketing. And there are also very simple tools on Substack to monetizing the work that you do. So it's very personal to you, and it's also a path to making money off of it. And I have to say that getting my start on Substack, was what gave me the materials that I could then show to other editors who might hire me and pay me for my work, what I was all about and what I love to do. So Substack was my proving ground. I can't say I'm making a ton of money off of it now. Some people on Substack are indeed like literally making millions of dollars because they have so many paying subscribers.
Mm,
I hope to push it in that direction. But, you know, any money that I make on Substack is bonus money because it led to my career as a cartoonist, commentator, illustrator, animator. So that was, yeah, it was like that was my grad
mm.
school in the creative work that I do, and the paying jobs followed that. So find your space where you can get your work out there, get feedback on it, see how people like it, see if they want to pay for it. And you have to get yourself into the marketplace to see what the market will bear and what people will pay you for. And you should
Mm,
be bold
mm.
about that. You should expect some flatlining when, oh, that idea didn't work. Oh, but this one did work. So then you're in the process of learning not only what you do best, what you do differently than everybody else does. And the key to being paid for it is if they feel like you have something unique to sell them that they can only get from you. And that's what the process is about, is it goes from I'm an audience of one, loving what I do but not getting any money for it, to being out in the world, seeing what people love about your work, following those breadcrumbs toward a payday, and it's working for me, and I'm really grateful to be on this journey.
Absolutely, and that's awesome. Now that brings me to my next question, which is when you were in your moment of rejection, when it looked like you were overlooked, when it looked like the economy had turned on you, right? And the things that you were doing before was no longer working. I think I don't know if you got laid off, you can correct me on that. Now, there are many people who are currently in that situation. They've been laid off from their jobs, well-paying jobs or survival job, whatever job they were doing, and that was like something they were hanging on to, right? And right now they are dejected. They feel rejected. They feel like nothing's working, and they feel like where do I go from here? They feel like it's too late to start, and it just instead of them to allow that to be a trigger that ignites their creativity, they further go down the path of burying their creativity and shutting down everything. So what do you have to say? Tell us about your story, about that moment where you felt rejected, you felt lost, you felt forgotten, you felt dejected, and how you were able to pick yourself back up, and then speak to someone on the other side on what your recommendations would be if they are in that moment right now.
Yeah, so I was the editor of Men's Health magazine. I don't know if you know Men's Health, but it was in 25 countries. I had worked there for 20 years. It was a super successful magazine in its time, and I knew that we were going through some budget difficulties, and I was the editor, so I was one of the bigger salaries on the masthead. And one day I got this like a weird phone call from HR, and I thought, that's funny. I didn't reach out to HR. I didn't. I don't have any business with them right now. So I took
Hmm.
this walk down the hallway, thinking, what's going on here? And that's when I saw my boss sitting in the office and the
Hmm.
head of HR, and I thought, oh, I'm about to be laid off, aren't I? And in fact, I was.
Hmm.
So I went from,
Hmm.
this big deal job, big deal editor of a big deal magazine to nothing. Like, what's next?
Hmm.
I had severance for 6 months, which carried me through. I hope that's still available to people who are being laid off from jobs now. Anyway, what I realized in that moment, like when everything went quiet for me career wise, then it was on me to come up with what the next step was. And the fact is, working at the big job that I
Hmm.
had and as busy as I was all the time, I didn't have a minute to think about what I wanted to do next. So that sense
Hmm.
of like sickening quiet that settles over you, sometimes you can't hear what you need to hear until that silence falls. So looking back on it now, I consider, that moment when my boss told me, Peter, we're very sorry, but, things aren't going as well as we hoped on the business side, so we can't afford you anymore. It was like, I look back on that
Hmm.
as the moment that set me on the path that I'm on right now. And the reason why I'm
Hmm.
on that path was kind of terrifying. It's like I had worked for decades in this one business. What was I going to do next? And I needed to come up with an answer that was
Hmm.
authentic to me. So, I'm not going to tell you that I made the leap exactly into what I'm doing now right at that moment. I had a bunch of trial and
Hmm.
error there too. And, frankly, I took on some
Hmm.
jobs that I didn't care about that much because, I still
Hmm.
need to put food on the table and pay the mortgage. Um, but
Yeah.
even while I was taking those jobs, I realized this is a quest I'm on. I am trying to find out what the next thing is in my life and my career that is going to have help me be as jazzed as I was during my time as a magazine editor, and I had a lot of fun doing that. But I need to find the new thing, and very often you cannot find the new thing until the old thing goes away. So when the old thing dies, if you can keep your head up, keep on looking forward, keep on asking yourself, what kind of work was I made to do? What kind of work can I uniquely do? You can take other jobs that aren't quite right, but as long as you keep that focus down the road, where am I heading? Where do I want to go?
Hmm.
Then you end up going in the direction your nose is pointing. If it's pointing at the ground, you're going to go into the dirt. If it's pointing ahead, you're going to go down the road, and it's up to you what that destination might be.
Wow. You see, when you were reliving that moment and telling the story, it just brought to my head two significant moments where I had similar experiences. Now, the first one was this. I was just, on my desk and I got an urgent, DM from a top line manager. This was not my direct manager, top line manager. And I'm like, what, what business do I have getting DM'd, getting messaged by this senior manager? And then the thoughts began to race. And then I said a prayer under my breath, and I'm like, hope I'm not getting laid off. And then he sent me a Zoom link and he said, join this meeting. I joined the meeting, and then when I joined the meeting, I saw lots of other colleagues. And then in the meeting, the director said, today we started laying people off. But if you're in this meeting, you're safe. And then I felt a relief. And then I began to hear the names of people who were impacted by that industrial action. And guess what? A lot of them were people that you would look up to in that organization. A lot of them were people that you would never think for a second will be impacted when such an action is being taken. But they got impacted. And that at that moment I told myself, hey, this could be me one day, right? So I have to figure out, an exit plan. I have to figure out a way out of this cocoon of this, golden handcuff before it's too late, right? And that helped me juggle my creativity. It helped me, jumpstart my creativity. And even though I was already on that creative journey, but it put a necessity on me that hey, you need to figure out something fast because these guys, they don't care about you that much, which is okay, right? And for the fact that even people who were good at what they were doing, who had spent years in the company, who had invested lots of time and energy and resources, of course, in exchange for getting paid, who had been loyal to the company, they were getting kicked out. I knew that hey, you have to figure out a way to manifest your creativity. Why? Because you can get fired from your job, but you can't get fired from your creativity. What do I mean by that? Steve Jobs built a company from the ground up, and after a while, the people on the board of that company, they came together and they fired Steve Jobs. They laid him off from a company that he had built. And then after he was let go, that company's revenue began to tank. And then they came together again and then they brought him back, right? And that was when that quote came to my head. Like, you can get fired from your job, but you can't get fired from your creativity. That's why it behooves us to work on our creativity and give our creativity some expression, some valuable expression in the marketplace in a way that can give us market value that people would happily pay us for. Now, that was one story. The other story was the story where I actually got that DM, and this time I knew that I would not be spared. I knew that I was going to be laid off. But guess what? I had already sorted out myself. I was already making some really good income from my side business, right? So when they were telling me, "Hey, we are sorry," blah 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 blah, I was just there. I was just no emotion. I was just there. And then when they were done, they sent me the severance pay and whatnot, and I took it. It felt like I was getting paid to do something I was already looking to do. Right now, that's what happens when you get yourself, you know, when you get yourself some creative expression and you do not wait for life to happen. Now, this is not to say to people who, they were not quite fortunate or they were not quite, ready when such situations in life happen. But this is to say to you on the other side who may be listening to me that, hey, the best time to develop yourself, to manifest your creativity, to turn your life around with your creative passions was yesterday, right? The next best time is now. So don't wait, don't sleep on the gold mine that you're sitting on, because right there is where your future lies, right? So you may be doing something odd today, but if you keep that vision, like Peter has said, we keep that vision, right in front of you, even while you're doing those other odd stuff, just to keep body and soul together. When the time is right, when the stars align, everything will fall in place, and you'll be able to, get rewarded for your stickability and your persistence. Now, I know that was a long rant, and I had to just tell those two stories because Peter's story, Peter's story kind of, brought those stories back to my mind. So, Peter, do you have anything to say?
It was yeah, you and I are brothers on other ends of the continent here, because it was that same, that I mean, in my position, I was a leader at the job. I had laid off many people, and it wasn't lost on me that if I was laying people off, the same thing could happen to me. I mean, it'd just
Hmm.
be a different person sitting in the
Hmm.
chair doing the laying off. And it's one of the reasons why, like,
Wow.
even when I was right in the middle of the most successful time I had had in my career at Men's Health magazine, I started taking art courses on the side in adult ed, because I was aware that I was good at what I did, but that there were sides of me that weren't being tapped creatively. And I was just super curious to see, what alternatives are to this thing that I'm doing 50 hours a week on my regular job. What other abilities do I have? And in the beginning, I wasn't even thinking about artwork and my drawing and painting as being something that would tap into my career. I just wanted to explore for myself to see what my abilities were there. And the further I got into it, the more abilities I uncovered. So, I often think of the metaphor here is, it looks just like my subscriber line on Substack. It starts off, it's kind of like flatlining along in the beginning, and then
Hmm.
at a certain point,
Hmm.
there's an inflection point and it starts to go up. And then, after 3 years of doing this, 14,000 subscribers is a lot on Substack. And what I
Wow.
realized was that it was like, in the beginning, it was only a very small part of my life. Now it's a huge part of my life, and so many things are coming out of
Hmm.
it. Um, and you have to be comfortable in the beginning, is like saying, I'm just starting something. Of course, it's only going to be 2%, 3% of my effort, my income, my creativity. But what will my life look
Hmm.
like when it's
Hmm.
25%, when it's 50%, when it's 90% of what I'm
Hmm.
doing? And to
Hmm.
bring
Wow.
and to watch that line go up. When the line starts going up, it's telling you something about
Hmm.
what you're doing. And you have to be okay
Yeah.
with the line being flat in the beginning, because you're figuring it out. You don't become an
Hmm.
overnight success at anything.
Hmm.
You put your work into it to the extent that you have time, and when you start figuring it out a little bit, then the line starts to go up and you start giving it more time. So I'm not telling anyone, don't quit your sweet gig now that's, well paying and all that. But you do have to
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself, what will I do when this goes away? And more importantly, what do I want to
Mm.
do when this goes away? I mean, there's always another
Mm.
job. Most of the time, another job, another kind of career, and if that's rewarding to you, great. If it's not rewarding to you, then you need to look to make your own luck by putting the work in. And, that can start out as a very small thing in the beginning and grow into a giant one.
Wow, that is really, really profound because you talked about flatlining. Many people have been wired with the idea of instant gratification that when they put their effort into something, they want to get paid immediately because that's the system of the 9 to 5. You put in 2 hours, you get 2 hours pay. You put in 10 hours, 8 hour work day or 40 hour work week, you get paid 40 hours. Get paid for 40 hours worth of work at the end of the week or at the end of 2 weeks or at the end of the month, right? And so people go into entrepreneurship, into manifesting their creativity with that same mentality. And so when you write a book and you don't get paid after 6 months of spending time sitting on a desk writing for hours, it's like, wow, I've just wasted my time, right? But the idea of manifesting one's creativity is about building a well oiled machine, building a system that will feed you, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line if you stay at it. For example, the man Jeff Bezos, who is now a billionaire, obviously, and his company has hit $1 trillion market cap and he's among the wealthiest men in the world for the past few years. When he built Amazon, it took him 10 years before he broke even, right? He kept sinking money down the hole. Now, I'm not telling you to sink your life savings into an idea that's not worth the while, that the market doesn't want. It has to be something the market wants, right? You have to look for those signals. But he knew that this thing was going to work. And so even when it felt like it was not working outwardly, he knew that it was working inwardly. He knew that he was putting the pieces together to get that machine up and running. And even though it took him 10 years to break even, he's the better for it now, right? So for me, the way I see what I do is that instead of working in a place where I'm working towards retirement, I'm working my retirement plan now, right? This is something that I think I want to do, for the rest of my life. This is, talking about, ideas, sharing ideas, impacting people, mentoring people, learning from people, having conversations that generates cash flow with people, or having messages, creating messages that moves the masses. These are things that I feel like I want to invest my time and my life in. And so I'm not necessarily, moved by the instant gratification. In fact, the only instant gratification I want right now is the fulfillment of seeing my ideas come to life. And then we take it from there to the next level. And so, speaking about that, I want to bring you into the conversation. How do you? I know we've talked about it in different ways, but maybe this time, if there's anything we've not touched on, this would be a good time to bring it in. What would you
Yeah. Well,
recommend as
again,
like the number one thing? Yeah, the number one thing to do to while you're waiting between that period of grinding to the period where it starts paying off. What would you recommend to
well,
do? One thing that
yeah,
a creative should do.
yeah. When I was reading War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, very like when I was a young man, there was one statement in there that really leapt out at me, and the statement that Tolstoy came up with was that all things come to the person who knows how to wait. All things come to the
Mm,
person who knows how to wait. And the implication in there, as I took it, was you're never just waiting, for some great thing to happen to you. The key in knowing how to wait is how you fill that time while you're waiting. So what skills are you taking on? What
Hmm.
ideas are you trying out? Who are you talking to? What books are you reading? What mentors
Hmm.
are you seeking out to train you in that? And and I'm not talking about any kind of
Hmm.
specific achievement right now. What I'm talking about is an inquiry into, here's this thing I want to do. Who are the people who are doing it really well? What can I learn from them? What can I teach myself? What is going to make my pursuit different than what anybody else has done and is unique to me? And another thing I wanted to pick up on was you were talking about, it's like, well, gosh, I can't wait, until I retire in 40 years. It's like, I think that the goal of every worker's life should be, what job can I work out for myself that I will never retire from because I love doing it so
Hmm.
much. Ask yourself what that motivation is in your life. What is that thing that will carry you from now until you're pushing up daisies in the graveyard? That's the thing that you want
Hmm.
to start doing now, that you want to start learning the skills from, and building your way into that being your full-time job. So, if you've got an idea that's as smart as Amazon.com, even though it's a tiny little idea, what can you do to build it into a gradually bigger and bigger and bigger idea until it becomes a thing that you are known for? That's the progression of a career.
Wow. And I just remembered a quote that one of my mentors used to say, Myron Golden. He would say, many people think I'm an overnight success. And I say, yes, but it was a 40-year night. In other words, he's trying to say it took him about 40 years of developing himself to get to where he is today, right? And that's the same thing, right? Are you willing to have that long night so that the joy can come in the morning, the joy of achieving that goal and realizing that dream and going from idea to increased income will come at the end. That is really, really, profound, and it's something to have in mind, something to keep in mind in going from being overlooked to being overbooked. Now, what do you recommend one should do to deal with the societal pressures? Because one of the things that keeps people down is what people think, or what will people say, or what are people saying, or oh, I'm getting overlooked, nobody cares about me, my video, nobody's watching my video, nobody's commenting on my post or on my blog or on my whatever, or nobody's signing up for my thing, my program, or nobody's subscribing to my idea, nobody's buying into my vision, right? So there's a a sense of external validation sometimes that we have, and you said it, you mentioned it at the start of our conversation when you talked about thinking we need permission, seeking permission to pursue our mission, right? So what would you say to someone right now who has caved into societal pressures and seeking external validations that they don't need, but they think they need because society has made it so? How can that person break out from that cocoon and make progress?
We are social creatures. I have succumbed, to that very same pressure myself. It's what drove me for, 30 years of a magazine career, because I could see my name in print, and what a thrill that was. Um, but what I realized was that, I was what I was doing was fulfilling other people's vision rather than my own. And it turned out that I was really good at fulfilling other people's visions rather than my own. But,
Hmm.
eventually that became a toxic choice for me. It was like, why am I going to write this guy's book for him when I have books that I want to write myself? And I did work. I worked as a
Wow.
ghostwriter and made a lot of money at it for
Hmm.
10 years. That's how, it's part of what allowed me to
Wow.
put my kids through college. And, I was kind of living off of, the nice pats on the head that I got from the named authors of these books when, the books I wrote for them hit the New York Times bestseller list. That was that was kind of good, but it wasn't my work. I got paid well for it, but it wasn't anything that was essential to me. So believe me, I
Hmm.
understand that desire to have to get validation for the work that you do. But, in the end, you have to respect your own permission to do what you do. Meaning, there are any number of, boss types who said, yes, Peter, you're a good magazine writer and editor. We'll pay you to do this. But, that kind of validation drowned out my own voice, which was asking, why am I writing somebody else's book, not my own? So, again, I was talking about the deafening silence that fell after I was laid off from Men's Health. And I had to ask myself, how was I going to fill that void? What is my mission now that I'm not doing somebody else's mission? So it's the smart thing that you said a moment ago, where when you went into that Zoom meeting and you heard about how other people were being laid off, the message there was exactly the right one. Your employer cares about you, like that much. You probably care about yourself that much. So whose voice are you going to listen to? Your employer's or your own? That's what you need to tune into. Hear what is important to you. What sparks joy in you? You talked about your mentor who had a 40-year night before his overnight success.
Yeah.
What I think each of us needs to be better at doing is curating the small successes that build into big ones. So don't look outside yourself for approval. Look inward. What feels good to you when you're doing it? What sparks your joy? What sparks your passion and enthusiasm? If you can tap into those in a good way and listen to the marketplace at the same time, you can combine your passion with
Absolutely.
what
That's a
the
key factor.
passions that are out there in the world. Yeah. So you have to be listening to both things at once, but the more important thing is listening to yourself.
Wow, that's great. And I like the fact that you chipped in the fact that you also have to, keep your ears and your eyes, you know, in the marketplace to read the data, right? You're not necessarily seeking them for validation or permission, but you're just seeking to see how much they value what you want to create or what you are creating so that you can engineer the value that you're creating to them in a way that they would happily pay you for it, especially if you want to profit from your passion. Now, if you don't want to profit from your passion, you can just do what you feel like doing. You can write what you feel like writing. You can create anything you feel like creating and put it on your shelf. But if you do want people to care about it, you have to care about what they are caring about or what they are hurting about, right? And that's different from seeking their validation. You're trying to figure out what problems are they, trying to solve, and how can I use my passions to, you know, build a bridge that will take them from their pain to their pleasures, right? So I just wanted to reaffirm that because you chipped it in rather brilliantly, and so I felt it was worth reiterating. Now, having said that, what do you have to say to authors? Because part of what I do is that I help authors also who are stuck. They've written books that nobody's buying and they're not making money from their work. You have successfully built a following by writing on Substack. And so I believe there's a thing or two that you may have to say to people who are on a writing journey, who are trying to turn their writing into wealth, turn their books into businesses, and go from broke to bestseller. So, any thoughts on that?
The book business is a vicious one. What was it? They used to say, I can't remember the stat exactly, but it's like one book in 5,000 will ever sell 50,000 copies. I wrote a number of bestsellers in my career, but I have to say that the reason why they were bestsellers is that I was writing books for people who already had a large audience who were paying attention to what they do. That's why they're paying me, because I had
Hmm.
the writing skills, but they were getting the big payday because they had the audience that they could go out there to. So I'd
Hmm.
be the last guy to say that it's easy to go from big idea to bestseller. It's not. It's a
Hmm.
tricky game. It's part of the reason why I got onto the
Hmm.
Substack, was that I didn't need anybody's permission to launch a Substack. It was, coming straight out of
Yeah.
me. And, I didn't need an agent or a big publishing house to put the book out there for me. I could write and illustrate pieces that I thought people would like, and it turns out they do, which means that I can now go back to into the publishing industry and say, I'm kind of a big deal over here. You should pay me to write a series of books for you. And that's the next turn that I hope to make in my career. I was just talking with a big deal agent last week about two book ideas I'd come up with that had been very popular. Things that I had posted on Substack. So I feel like I have a track record there. I have something that I'm already selling. Then I can go to the booksellers or go to this agent and then the booksellers and say, um, people love this. You should pay me to do it. As opposed to um, just coming up with some harebrained idea and putting it out there. No one notices it. You need to find your audience. You need to build your audience. You need to delight your audience with what you're doing. And then you can go to the agents of the world and the booksellers of the world, and they'll pay attention to you. Right now, if you're just somebody's noodling around with, you feel like you're the best haiku writer in the world, there's not going to be a market for that. On the other hand, if you love to read thrillers or romance novels, there's a market for those. And if you feel like you can do it, better or in a new way than anyone else is, then that path can exist for you. But you need to, pursue that path yourself with passion and devotion and lots of hard work. It's I was talking earlier about we need to keep our eyes on the market. One of the reasons you need to keep your eye on the market is if the whole herd is going right, there may be a market if you go left. So it's like Jeff Bezos
Hmm.
in the world that he emerged into is like, yes, there are giant department stores all over everywhere, and they have products, and you can drive your car there and go try and pick one out from the 3 or 4 items that are on the shelf that you can choose from. But wouldn't it be cool, says Jeff Bezos, if I could develop a store online where every product that is available in the world is there and you can choose among all of them? So the whole world at that point was going right, to the grocery store, to the department store. Jeff Bezos saw a way to go left and open up a new online way to shop. And in the beginning, we all thought he's nuts.
Hmm.
People are never going to trust the internet. In fact, he found a way to marry the security of uploading your credit card on Amazon.com with infinite choice and fast delivery. I mean, it sounds brilliant when I say it now. In 1985, people would have said you're nuts and it's never going to work. And he had to take the spark of, I know how it's going to work, and I'm going to get there, step by step by step. That's what your market research is about, is what the market is after right now, what's missing, what can I provide that will also bring me joy while I'm providing it.
Wow, that's so cool. Now you've lived in different eras. You've lived through different revolutions, and currently we're in the artificial intelligence revolution. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, with all that's happening around artificial intelligence, especially in the industry where you're currently thriving in: publishing, writing, animation, creation, cartooning, and all of that. What do you think is the future holds for publishers, writers, animators, and all of that, content creators, with the advent of AI and with the popularity that's been gained in our time?
Uh, I personally am not afraid of AI because the kind of writing I do is unique to me. Um, a computer could never draw as badly as I do, but it could also can't draw with
Hmm.
the same character and ideas and humor behind it that I do. So, you look at
Hmm. Hmm.
especially AI illustration, they're all terrible because what they're building on are
Hmm.
they're just stealing from images that are already out there in the world. No matter how clever your prompts are with
Hmm.
AI, it's still going to the well of images that have existed forever and already exist and are kind of glossy and professional looking, but
Hmm.
they're also like just super boring. So I do use AI
Hmm.
in the work I do, but I use well, you're familiar with. Back there's a tradition in comedy where you have the straight man who's saying like the boring obvious thing, and then you have like the crazy funny idea guy who is playing off of the straight man. So I consider AI to be my
Hmm.
straight man. If I want to know what everybody has already thought about something, I'll ask AI. That'll be in my prompt. Give me an article about whatever about skiing in Colorado. Then I'll get the article about skiing in Colorado. But that's where I bring the human touch to it. Is okay. This is what everybody says about skiing. What's funny about it? What's weird about it? What how can I pervert it and twist it on its head so it's funny, but that skiers who are going through this reality all the time will also think, well, go right along with me and say, I've always thought that was stupid, a stupid thing about skiing too. Here in Colorado, the traffic jams that prevent us from getting to the ski mountain. I mean, that's a subject that's ripe for humor. And also, just funny stuff that happens to me on the ski slope, when I'm skiing in Colorado. All of those things rely on having an experience. AI can be that experience for you. And how am I going to flip it in a new original direction? And AI is not great at being original. It's great on telling you what people already know. So if you want to do your market
Hmm.
research with AI, that's a help. But it's not going to give you the creative spark to show people what they've been missing in the world because you haven't come up with it yet. That's where your originality comes out, and AI can spur you toward that because it's such a place to go to find what people already know, what they've already thought, what they've already written
Hmm.
about. You want to be
Hmm.
original and creative.
Hmm.
That's why you're going to put AI here and then go off on your own personal
Hmm.
tangent that nobody ever thought of before until you did.
You hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the spot, right? And that was such a good way to say it. I have an episode on my channel for you listening on the other side. Do well to check it. I have an episode that is titled AI will not save you. If you think artificial intelligence will save you, think again. Artificial intelligence will not save you from your need for creativity. It will not save you from your need for originality. It can enhance your creativity if driven properly and intelligently, but it will not save you from your need to be smart, creative, and brilliant in your display of your unique gifts, skills, and talents, right? And I can go on, but I think Peter has already done justice to that question. So I'm going to leave it there. I think this was such a fantastic conversation. I want to say thank you, Peter, for coming on. And with the way we're going, I know that we could have gone another hour nonstop without gassing out, without running on fumes. But I think that this is a good place to call it, right? So thank you for coming. And for you on the other side, I trust that this has been a rewarding time. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. If you enjoyed it, tell us in the comment section, and we'll be happy to read your comments and respond. And feel free to share with your loved one, feel free to share with your friends who are currently making that leap to going from being overlooked in whatever fields they are in or in whatever areas or spheres of life they are working in, going from being overlooked to being overbooked. because I believe that this conversation would definitely help them turn things around by jacking up their creativity and rejigging their creativity. So I'm going to leave it here. See you on the other, see you next time. See you on another episode or on the next episode. Until then, have a good one and bye bye.